Um, so second language acquisition. So let's start. Okay. How do we acquire a second language? So historically, we have had different types of methods. And in these methods, you have seen everything. You know, remember, and I remember this when I took French in high school, a couple of classes, where the teacher always wanted me to repeat what they were saying. Okay, voiture. I don't even know if that's the way you say it. French teachers, right? Car? Okay. Voiture, repitan, voiture, y repitan, voiture. See? Or maybe classes where you work a lot on the grammar. And you were presented with conjugations, grammar structures, and you were supposed to make sense of the language through the grammar. So in all of these type of methods here, we have a different approach. I'm not gonna go through this because I know you went through those in college, okay? But kind of like the presentation, there has been historically many ways to approach second language acquisition. And we must respect, you know, each one of these ways to try to teach second languages, because that's what happened at that moment, right? So we cannot say, oh, these people were crazy, the other people had no idea what they were doing, or anything. We're just right now, because everything evolves. So how do we acquire our own language? This is a picture of me when I was maybe 6 months. I used to have blue eyes. Things changed when I moved to America 20 years ago. Okay? And how do we acquire our own language? How many of you remember mom and dad giving you grammar lessons when you were 1 year old and helping you with conjugations and helping you distinguish the direct object and the indirect object pronoun in each one of the sentences that you were trying to work with? And I'm sure that this is a kind of like a resemblance of how you were at that time, making sure that you were, you know, applying everything that you learned in the lesson through mom and dad. So how do we acquire our own language? Obviously, by the environment, by the big context. And we know these days that even when you are inside of mama's belly, you are learning, right? You're listening to sounds. You are recognizing spaces. And that is part of that second language acquisition that started really early. And we're able to tell who's mom, who's dad, who's my annoying brother. We're able to tell if we have a pet, and we sense all those things since we are there. So I don't know, there might be that we have some people who went through this process of early language lessons in order to acquire their own language. You never know. This is a very interesting world. See? Muy bien. So we have something called comprehensible input. So comprehensible input, and every time that I read different threads on Facebook or Twitter, people realizes that they have been doing a lot of what comprehensible input proposes since a long time ago. And it's like, I've been doing this for a while, see? So why? Because comprehensible input is a combination of these two methods of instruction that we have been using for a very long time. So to say I'm a comprehensible input teacher doesn't mean that you hold the truth, and that doesn't mean that it's the latest thing. It just means that you are putting into place, putting into work some strategies that we have been working with for a very long time. Now, there's a difference, and the big difference is that we were not aware of the importance of the input in language acquisition, and how important is that that input is comprehensible, okay? So we'll talk about that more. So what is the role of the teacher? It says, teachers can teach languages, but we can create the right conditions for second language acquisition to happen. So I'm really not a Spanish teacher, and that's why I never say at the beginning of my presentations, hi, my name is Diego Ojeda and I teach Spanish. See, or I'm a Spanish teacher. I believe that I am a facilitator of language in my classes. And when we look at facilitating versus teaching, you see that there's a big difference there, because when you facilitate, you're probably a little bit less structured than the teacher who prepares the lesson in a very organized way. You just allow language to happen in your class. Each language class should be an excuse for language to happen. It should be an excuse for kids to experience language, not to learn the language. And there's a big difference between those two things. So you might be thinking, I do that. So I am a comprehensible input teacher. See, comprehensible input. Many people, they say, what is comprehensible input? Is it a method? Is it an activity? Is it a philosophy? What is it? Well, it's a way to approach language learning, okay? But keep this in mind. We can't really teach languages. There are many stories. Let's say my mom. When I was 13 years old, my dad was invited to teach at a school, at a college in South Korea, because my dad is a professor. And the whole family went to South Korea, and my mom wanted to take English classes. And she took English classes, and she always brought A's in her workbook. See? A. So mom, you can speak English. No. See? But you have A's in your workbook. I can't. See? Because she was then trying to teach the language. And that's not the way it really works. Muy bien. So we say, from teacher to the facilitator. So the facilitator. We need to create the right environment in the class for language to happen. Versus we need to create the right lesson curriculum for language to happen. Okay? Muy bien. So goal of the second language class, L2 class. The L2 class must be based only in communication. Okay, what is the goal of language? To communicate, right? So why should the goal of a language class be different from communicating? So is the goal of the second language class, level 1, to teach the present tense and colors and some adjectives. Level 2, preterite tense and a little sparkle of the imperfect. Level 3, imperfect, and we start touching a little bit also on the subjunctive maybe. So, okay, so that's communication, right? So we touch on a very important topic, which is proficiency. What is proficiency? Proficiency. Can someone tell me what means proficiency in language learning? Vamos, clase, come on. We need to participate here. What is proficiency? Proficiency is very simple, It is the ability that individual has to survive in a second language environment. See? So if I take my student, let's say we take Nick, and we put him in the middle of Madrid, España, he should be able to survive, and he should be able to ask basic questions about where the hotel is, where can he find food, where is the restroom, to survive in that environment. But if we are only presenting grammar structures in the class and we place Nick in the middle of Madrid and he starts, yo soy, tú eres, él es, nosotros somos, vosotros sois, ellos son, ahora en el subjuntivo, que yo sea, que tú seas, wow, excelente, sabes muy bien todas esas conjugaciones, but you don't know how to survive in that environment. So the proficiency level is telling me in what situations you can survive using the second language. What is your ability to use it? What is your ability to communicate? So it's important to keep also that in mind. Okay, getting comprehensible input. So we have different things here. Okay. Obviously, we talk about childhood. And during our childhood, how was the input that your parents hopefully gave you? See, I think about my daughter, Sophia. Sophia Kathleen has Down syndrome and autism. And when she was very little, she had a lot of issues with her hearing because her channels here were really, really small, so she had a lot of infections. So she had like 5 different surgeries. Sophie now is 14 years old, but she still says water instead of water. Water. See? She still says acha. You have any idea what acha means? Acha is McDonald's. I don't know how acha became McDonald's, but acha. So when she says acha, it's because it's the weekend, and on the weekend we treat her chicken nuggets from McDonald's. Okay? But when she was a little kid, I remember, trying to give her the example and say, honey, do you want water? Water? Yeah? More. We taught her the sign language too, so she will be like, more. Say, you want more, honey? There you go. And I'm sure that when you were little, your parents help you with developing your language, your first language that way, in a very kind way. See? Because your parents love you, believe it or not, at this age, but when you were little, they loved you, okay? So they were nice, they were kind. So that is the first step to comprehensible input. And we can talk here for hours about community building, about class environment, or what Dr. Krashen says, the affective filter, okay? We can spend a lot of time trying to analyze how is that environment that we're creating in the class. Is it conducive for that input to be comprehensible or not? Oh yes, I care about my students. I bring them candy every day. Okay, well, tell me what happens in the class. Oh yes, I care about my students because I listen to their issues and their problems every day. Okay, what is going on in the language class? See? So the idea is to help them in a kind way to start understanding what we're trying to do in the class. The interactions in the class need to be meaningful, in the sense that if we, going back to my French class, okay, what do I remember about my French class? I remember, la voiture des gens c'est jaune. La voiture des gens c'est jaune. La voiture des gens c'est jaune. Okay, how meaningful that interaction is in my real life. See? How can we make our interactions meaningful in the classroom? How? See, there's an author from Spain, her name is Maria Caso, which I recommend highly, Maria Caso, and she talks about disruptive education, meaning teaching or approaching education the other way, not the way we always do it. So one of the things in which you can do a meaningful interaction with your students is very simple. Sit with them. You're in a circle. Just sit with them. ¿Qué tal el día? How was your day? ¿Estás bien? ¿Mal? ¿Por qué estás, Michael? ¿Por qué estás mal? Michael, no dice nada. Do you go, Michael, no dormiste bien, ¿verdad? Depending on the level of proficiency that your students have, you can interact. But at very low levels, you can say, no dormiste bien. See? Okay, very simple language, but it's meaningful because the student is reading here, the teacher cares about me. See? And we always think that the students learn what we teach them. And that is such a lie. The students never learn what we teach them. What are the students doing while we're trying to teach in front of them? They're looking at your pants. They know that you used the same socks yesterday. See? They're looking around. They're thinking about their social life. They're thinking about their family life. Okay. Not because they regurgitate in the exam what came out of our mouth means that they learn it. How many times in the old style of teaching, we gave a list of vocabulary and a grammar topic, like in the textbooks, vocabulary with grammar, yeah, always match. And then we practice, try, practice, try, and then the exam, and then they gave me everything, and many students got an A, but 1 month later, they couldn't remember any one of those words or structures. They were not meaningful. They were just used in the game of education. Interesting interactions. So those interactions must be interesting. Do not be afraid to be yourself. And this all deals with comprehensible input. See, we're not here to say that comprehensible input is rocket science, because it's not. We're here to understand that comprehensible input is very simple. It's very simple as language acquisition. So interesting interactions. I'm sure that we have interesting things in our life that we can share with our students without having to be too intimate or too personal or private, that they will find interesting. See? So my students, I'm giving you an example, my students know everything about Sophie's routine. But through Sophie's example, now they know more about autism and about Down syndrome, what that is. See? So we are not just focusing on the language itself, we're focusing on life through language. Memorable, how you say this in English, please?
Memorable.
Memorable, again?
Memorable.
Gracias. Memorable.
Yeah.
Memorable interactions. See? How do we make each class memorable? How do we make each class important? Because how many sessions do we have usually on a regular basis with our students? Well, it depends if you teach in the block schedule, or you teach every other day block schedule, or you teach every day the period, the 40 minutes period or 45 minutes. But you see them at least every other day. And that's not easy. It's not easy to make those encounters memorable. But it's not impossible either. See? Because we're talking about life, and there are always certain situations in the students' lives, in the school's life, in the city's life, in the country's life, where you can take from the world. ¿Sí? Y por ejemplo, for example, podemos hablar, we can talk about las elecciones de gobernador en Kentucky. ¿Sí? And how interesting que dos candidatos, uno ganó, pero otro no quiere que el otro gane. ¿Sí? Entonces, tiene que conectarse. It has to be connected with the reality. And also, a safe environment. A safe environment just means that the student can be themselves, that the teacher can be themselves. There are so many things that happen in my class that I know that the students are not going to tell somewhere else, not because they're inappropriate or not, but because we start feeling that this is just part of our little community in the group. We feel safe. We can share things that, you know, are important to us in a meaningful way. Muy bien. So if the students cannot understand, it's just input. I've been teaching for 32 years. See, I'm 53. See, so in those 32 years, I have taught elementary, middle school, high school, college. I have taught Spanish as a second language, Spanish as a first language, and sometimes I stood up in front of my students, showing them how great I was, and just speaking blah 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 and blah 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 blah. So I thought I was trying to give them some input. The idea was, if the student is exposed to the language, they will eventually acquire it. But I didn't make it comprehensible. That's the difference, see? And that's why many students were still a bit frustrated when I taught the way I used to. So we need to make sure that the student understands what we're saying. Later I'm gonna just touch base in one or some things of how can we make it comprehensible to the student. Muy bien. Comprehensible input. So, in order to acquire oral or reading proficiency in a second language, we only need to be able to understand the message, not the language in itself. Because the student can tell you what an adjective is, what a direct topic pronoun is, what an indirect topic pronoun is, what are the three modes, the four modes of verbal modes in Spanish. ¿Sí? So, indicativo, subjuntivo, la orden, el imperativo y
Ni idea.
¿sí? El condicional, ¿sí? Entonces, so I remember doing this to my students. Guys, you need to learn how to recognize what is the role of each one of the words in the language. Well, I was taught that way. When I went to college in Bogotá, Colombia, we were taught in a way that it was called gramática generativa del español. So we had to analyze every component of the sentence. And somehow, after making lines here, arrows there, and a big graphic, we were supposed to understand the whole thing. See? So, of course, I was teaching the same way. We do not have to translate everything in order to make the L2 comprehensible. Well, we have other ways. See? We can use gestures. We can use our smile. We can reassure our students about what we're doing in the class and make them feel comfortable that they can understand this. So it's not always translation, because sometimes I have observed many classes where the teacher speaks very well the second language, but then they say something and immediately they translate it to the student's language, and they keep moving, and then Spanish, and then they translate it. So what is the student's role in that class? Just wait for the English. See? What happens when the Spanish is happening, or the French, or the Italian? They just block it. See? Because they know that the translation is coming. Okay? So we need to make them work a little bit as well. Muy bien. So acquisition versus learning. You acquire things in an unconscious way. You learn in a conscious way. See? You listen. You allow the input to happen. You take notes. See? And I can give you many more examples between acquiring something or learning something. And with languages, we need to allow the acquisition to happen. So what is the role of grammar? See? So, Senor, you're just against grammar, right? No, I'm not against grammar. In reality, I believe that a language teacher should know how the language works. But that doesn't mean that that's what we're going to teach our students, and that doesn't mean that that's what we hope the students know at the end of the course, how the language works. That helps me organizing the class, that helps me organizing the topics, that helps me organizing the input. And that helps me especially with the proficiency. What proficiency I'm expecting from my students, because I understand how my language works through the grammar. Now, you probably have heard this. Oh, well, comprehensible input is so good for lower levels. See? But not for upper levels. And there's kind of like a group of people who are so scared about trying to use comprehensible input with upper levels. But my response is always the same. The proficiency is different, so allow some kind of input that matches that proficiency of the student. That doesn't mean that you have to rely just on grammar in the upper levels. But be careful, because 3, 4, APs are levels where the students are polishing the language. Yes, it's important to make mini grammar lessons here and there. And I know that Dr. Krashen will kill me, Tina Hargaden will kill me if they hear me saying those things, but it's the reality, and that's what I have seen in my classes, and I'm here to share with you what I have seen in my classes, okay? Because, look, me as a second language learner, my biggest mistake always was in English was to use did and then the verb in the past. See? Did you study it? See? Because, you know, the way my grammar brain worked in Spanish. Did you study? But when I was conscious of that, I have to go to the rule. And the most important rules are simple. They are not, big books. The grammar that we actually want our students to handle in the second language can be very small. Yes?
Just a thought I have, and this is just a general question too. Why is it so much more difficult for adults to learn the second language than, say, children?
That is a myth. I came to the United
Yeah,
States.
see,
I came to the United States.
Because you hear this all the time.
You know, see, I came to the United States 20 years ago. I was 33 years old. And I did not speak English at all. See? But somehow I allowed myself to get the input because I needed it. We need to create that urgency. If the adult or the kid feels the same urgency to acquire that second language, it will happen. Look at the football, soccer players around the world. Think about Tino Asprilla. Tino Asprilla is a wonderful soccer player from Colombia, and he was born in a very small town in Colombia, Tuluá Valle. And he didn't even go to high school in Tuluá. He went to elementary school and then he played soccer his whole life. But he was so good that he ended up playing for Newcastle in England. He ended up playing for Napoli in Italy. And he happened that he learned Italian, he learned English. See? He needed the urgency to understand what was going on. Now, the urgency in our classes is not the grade. Because we're so used to tell the kids, okay, you guys need to learn this because otherwise you're going to do really bad in the exam. No, the urgency comes first from that creation of community that you work with at the beginning of the class. Once you have those students feeling part of a community, you can ask anything from them. And I have concrete examples later on. See? Because I'm not here just to blah, blah, blah. I want to show you some examples. Okay? And I have never based my class on the grammar. I have never based the class on the traditional instruction. It has always been the way I'm just sharing with you here. But that's a myth, Michael. We can do it. See? The thing is the approach. Think how usually the adults who want to learn a second language usually go to a traditional school of language. What are they using? What method are they using? See? And then let's analyze the context of the urgency to learn the language. But I'm sure, Michael, if you want, I know you want to learn Italian. I know, I can see it in your eyes. See? You know what's the best way? Is just, if you happen to find a special person who speaks Italian, that person is going to give you enough input for you and motivation to actually learn the language at whatever age. Another story, I know. Sorry. Okay, I used to live in Wisconsin. And
Frío. Qué frío.
Sí, hace mucho frío. And there's many farms. And there were some Colombians in Wisconsin. And there was a couple of Colombian, a family, and they were struggling finding something to do. But this guy, Alvin, 100% from Wisconsin, he hired them. He had never taken a language class, but he connected so well with them that in a couple of years, Alvin was communicating with them in Spanish. And it's not that they came to teach a class to him. Their English wasn't that good, so they somehow also spoke sometimes Spanish to Alvin, and that for him was meaningful. Okay? Muy bien. So, seguimos. If you can't remember a word, if the student cannot remember a word, it's because that word wasn't meaningful in the context of your instruction. See? It is amazing how we watch in Spanish, there's a soap opera that is called Silvana Sin Lana. And we watch Silvana Sin Lana, is one of those Telemundo soap operas. And I love those operas because they have a lot of different expressions. See? And one of the expressions was ponerle los cuernos a. What means ponerle los cuernos a? See? Los chicos se acuerdan de esas palabras. They remember all those words. Ponerle los cuernos. They remember es porque tiene palanca. Yeah. Palanca means clout. So, si tú quieres, if you want to belong to a social club, but you don't have the ways to belong to that club, but you have some friends in the board of directors, that's the clout. That is la palanca que tú tienes that you have in order to kind of like do some things that usually you wouldn't be able to. Like for example, my first job was just palanca because my dad wanted me to do something. I was 21 years old after I graduated from college, and I'm like, no, I want to be a writer. I don't want to work. I want to think. I want to write. Leave me alone. And it's like, no, I have a friend who has a school. You're gonna go there and you're gonna teach, because he had palanca. See, that connection. All right. So those are the words that are meaningful, and of course, those are the words that the students remember. But if we're expecting them to remember a word like, I don't know, any word can be meaningful, because it all depends on the context where you put it. See? The other thing is that we cannot do the 50 words that the student tells us to do in 2 weeks. You have 2 weeks to study 50 words and 2 grammar topics, and sometimes 3 grammar topics. That's killing. See? Muy bien. Now we talk about comprehensible input, but many people say, hey, but what about the output? See? And there's a discussion right now on the role of the output, because we're so used to enter the second language classroom, give our first Spanish 1 class to our students, and then talk about the days of the week. And we don't feel that we are good teachers if by the end of that week the kids are not repeating the days of the week. Okay, now think about life. You're giving all this input to your kids. See? Usually parents are very kind and very patient. And the moment the kid uses one of those words that they hear at home, you're like, yeah, he used the word, see? But we don't celebrate those things because we expect them by the end of the week to repeat those days of the week in the target language, the colors in the target language. Amarillo, azul, rojo, negro, lunes, martes, miércoles, jueves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's what you learn. Yeah, that's communicating a lot. So sometimes the forced output can feel like this to the students. They are on the spot. They are really not feeling good because many students don't like to perform in front of the class. See? So allow that input to happen, especially at those lower levels. The kids will want to say some things. Well, ask for other kind of answer. Okay, chicos, hoy es martes. Show me your fingers, sí o no, sí, entonces sí, o con colores, sí, o en esta esquina, los chicos que tienen hermanos, hermanas, que no tienen ni hermanos ni hermanas. So allow that to happen and allow them to use other forms to let you know that they are understanding what you're telling them. And I do this also at the AP levels. And yes, the AP levels, as the AP College Board asked me to prepare them to do a cultural comparison in 2 minutes. They have 4 minutes to prepare the cultural comparison, and then they need to perform and record a cultural comparison. Okay, that is the end. That is not the beginning. We cannot start the AP class asking our students to do that just because it's practice. We need to take them by their hand with little activities, scaffold, until they get there. Okay? If you're more interested about that, I have an activity on my blog that you are welcome to use because my blog is free. Okay, so this is all it takes. In order to be good speakers, you have to be first a good listener. See? And one of the most important rules in the comprehensible input classroom is listen with the intent to understand. Listen with the intent to understand. Listen with the intent to understand. We come to a conference, see, a workshop. We sit there for the first 10 minutes. I have heard this so many times. You block. You're not listening with the intent to understand. You get bored, you start grading, or you just leave. See? Because you're not giving yourself 100% there. So those CI, comprehensible input rules, are very important, and I'm always asking my students to listen with the intent to understand. And that doesn't mean that miraculously they're going to understand everything that I say. But if they make an effort, they might. What happens when you go to a foreign country and you are looking for directions to the hotel because you're lost, and you allow yourself to ask someone, where is hotel? See? Oh, that hotel, yeah. Keep walking straight and then take a right, and you're like with your eyes like this, listening to every word, looking at the gestures, everything. You're listening, you're giving yourself to 100% trying to understand what that person is saying. We need to help our students understand that that's the most important thing in language learning, that we need to listen with the intent to understand. And it's not easy. It's not easy because in our life, you know, I remember this day when I was watching Colombia versus Brazil on the TV, and my wife says, no tenemos leche. We don't have milk. We need milk. I'm like, okay, see. Will you go to Kroger and get some milk? And by the way, we also need eggs. Yeah. Goal, Colombia! Sí, Colombia, mejor que Brasil. The game is over, turn off the TV, and then I go and do my thing. And then 3 hours later, Sophia wants milk. Like, okay, we have no milk. I told you. Yeah. If I'm lucky, I remember vaguely that conversation. See? Conversation. But usually I don't even remember that we had that conversation because I wasn't listening with the intent to understand. See? So it is hard, but we can train our students to do that. Look, if you really train your students to listen with the intent to understand, you're gaining a lot in the classroom. You don't have to, bring heavy contents to the classroom as long as they are understanding what you are bringing, the piece that you're bringing. So, listening results in speaking, not the opposite. We are so used to think that they have to speak in order to show that they understand. That's not how it happens. It happens the other way. Same thing with reading and writing. See? We want them to write. And people start posting pictures on Facebook and everywhere. I'm so proud of my first level. They just wrote all of this. See? Reading. The more we read, the better we write. The more we read, the better we write. You guys are educators. You know the value of reading. See? And not to mention that a person who reads understands better the world. See? And if you understand better the world, that helps you connecting with other people better. So that leads into good writing. See, it's not the grammar rules. Oh yeah, the accent over acción, because it's palabra aguda que termina en N. See? No, it's because, you acquired that while you were reading. So then we talk about the importance of reading in the second language class. It is important to have a library of books that kids can become familiar with, choose books, but it's also important that you make them responsible for whatever they read. It's not just, I have my FVR, which means what? Free voluntary reading. I'm so proud because I have all that wall full of books and my students can choose a book whenever they want and read whatever they want. And in the meantime, I do my thing here on my desk. No, you need to make them accountable, and that's not easy because that means that you have to read all those books so you can have conversations. AC Quintero is a writer from, which reminds me, I'm going to raffle books today, I think. He's a writer from Chicago, and she has really good activities on using reading in the classroom. She has a free blog as well. If you don't remember, just ask me later. Okay, so do we assess the second language? Of course, the schools want us to give them the test. Parents want to see a grade. And we sacrifice the formative for the summative because we have to have a grade. That is just the reality. So there are ways in which you could assess your students in a little more open way, but the reality is that schools and parents and even the students, they want to see the grade. They think that an A is telling them that they speak the language. My brother-in-law, he took AP Spanish in La Crosse Central, and he got a 4. We cannot communicate in Spanish. We can't, but he got a 4. See? So why do we assess speaking? Why do we assess listening? See? What tension does that create in our students when we sit with them for interviews? This teacher from Spain that I mentioned at the beginning of the workshop, she uses a mask. It's like a bird mask when she does interviews. If you have to do interviews, you have to do it in a very relaxed way. See? You have to bring the candy, you know your students and you know how to relax them. But it cannot be something super formal because real life is formal. No. Real life is gonna happen later. See, right now they are students and we need to help them be the best speakers and the best listeners. So what are we gonna do in order to do that? Okay. The other thing is that we all acquire second languages in very different ways. We think that because we're in this part of the curriculum, everyone is at the same part of the curriculum. The reality is that we have levels 4 APs with kids all over the place with different proficiency levels. That's something that we need to expect. Why? Not because some are smart and the other ones are not smart. No, it's just because we're human and we have different rates to acquire everything in life. See? We cannot expect the same thing from every student. Okay, what is your proficiency level in your language 1? Say proficiency levels: novice, low, mid, high; intermediate, low, mid, high; advanced, low, mid, high; superior, low, mid, high. Is everyone here superior in your own language? Haha, take an exam. Take an exam. If you're a native English speaker, go and take a proficiency exam. See? Because I did it. I did it, and I took my Spanish proficiency exam, and I have been an educator for all those years that I told you. And I was rated at intermediate high.
¿Qué?
Intermediate high. See? And I was offended, of course. See? But then I was like, okay, might be. Now think, what is the proficiency level in your students' main language, native language? What do they use on a regular basis to go by? Maybe an intermediate low, but we want them to intermediate mid and intermediate high after 4 or 5 years of second language. But after 15, 16, 17 years, they are at intermediate low in their own language. See? So those are things that we need to consider. And it's okay that the student stays, those intermediate levels, that they don't keep going like this. They stay there for a while, right? Those who know about proficiency. Okay, muy bien. Sí.
I have a question.
Sí.
So, I don't teach upper level AP or anything like that. But if I were to do that, and I'm very sensitive to what you just said about, in their own native language, they may not have, they are at a certain level.
Yeah.
And we expect them to perform on an AP exam. So let's say that the expectation for an AP exam is that they have to be able to speak for the oral component, they have to be able to speak at an intermediate high.
Uh-huh.
I just wonder what the implications are for you as a teacher who teaches at that level in order for them to score high.
Now, the thing is that how do I know, the thing is that a student can be one day intermediate high and the other day intermediate low. It's just like this,
Right.
See? I'm also an AP grader. So I go to Cincinnati and I grade AP exams, so I know what they want. What they want is communication, the student to be able to communicate the message in written or orally, see? And can mistakes happen? Yes, mistakes can happen. Can a student who made a mistake have a 5? Yes, if they correct themselves, see? If they use another device or form or strategy to clarify what they wanted to say, because that's what happened in earlier life. Just think, you and your best friend, Angela, and you said something to that best friend, and she get offended. But that wasn't what you intended to say. Honey, that's not what I meant. And you're both speaking your native language. See? So I know that there is an expectation for the AP exam, but my advice is if you're allowing comprehensible input to happen in your class, your students are understanding everything that you bring to the class, whatever level, and then they can show you somehow that they are understanding that, they should be at a point after that AP class where they can take the exam. And you know, I mean, I don't want to make any promises here, but my students usually have very good results in AP exams. And I have never gone through, okay, in the next 3 weeks we're gonna work on the persuasive essay and the form, different parts of the persuasive essay and the hypothesis here and this. No, just what do you think about beauty based on the movie that we watch, Real Women Have Curves? See? What are the implications? How can you make a distinction between what you think about what beauty is and what these people thought in the movie? See, make it real, make it meaningful. That is the key. And the AP exam, I think they just want students to be able to express themselves, to convey messages that are a little higher than your normal hola, ¿cómo estás? Muy bien, gracias, ¿y tú? ¿Sí? Sí, muy bien. Entonces, the role of correction. We feel that because the student is talking, they make a mistake and we correct them, then they got it. What is the role of correction? Corrective feedback. Ooh, see, we're getting to big words here. So, I never correct my students. At least not live in class, in front of everyone. If it's a written document, I might give them some feedback, but I'm not going to cross here, separate this, put accent here, wrong conjugation. Number one, they're looking for the grade. See? Number two, it's not effective. I need to model the correct way. I need to expose them to texts that are very well written, so they will acquire that in a different way, not because we push them. Speaking is a result, not the cause, of language acquisition. Quality of input. It is important that we give quality input to our students. And if you are a teacher who is just starting, you don't feel very comfortable with the language, there are so many things that you can find out there on the internet that will allow for some quality input. There's a digital tool that is called Edpuzzle. Does someone use Edpuzzle? Edpuzzle is really good because you work with, let's say, YouTube videos, and you can ask questions based on those videos. The students have to repeat. That is good input. It doesn't always have to be the teacher. Muy bien. What time is it? Okay, I want to show you the examples. So, let me see if this link works here. Yeah. Sorry, this is from another presentation. But, oh, this is my daughter, Sofia. Oh, te amo, mi amor. Okay, so, look at the class rules, see? Listen with the intent to understand. One person speaks, the other students listen. Support the flow of the conversation. Nothing on your desks, but then again, I have no desks, just chairs. And do your 50%, because I'm here to do my 50% as well. So you can find these class rules in English and post them on benslavic.com. He has all these rules and they are free there on a PDF format. Muy bien. So, sorry. Okay, aquí. So, tips to make the class comprehensible. Give them clues about the meaning of what you're talking about. It's very different to say to the students, chicos, yesterday I was playing soccer and I hurt my leg. And I was bleeding for a very long time, and then they took me to the doctor. Versus, guys, yesterday I was playing soccer with my friends, and then I got hurt and blood was coming from my knee. See? Oh, ooh. But they're listening what you're saying in the target language. You're using gestures. you can use pictures, you can use drama. For example, a song. We play with songs, we work with songs in the classroom. Ask your students to dramatize the song. And every time they talk about love, they have to do the love sign. If they talk about crying, they have to, ¿sí? Entonces, por ejemplo, en español, there's a song que dice, ayer me dijiste que tú me querías, pero todo fue mentira. Yesterday you told me that you loved me, but it was a big lie. So, ayer tú me dijiste que tú me querías, pero todo fue mentira. Entonces, que hagan la declamación, ¿sí? We can use, again, actions. We can be dramatic, emotional, your voice. You know, we need to be masters of our voice in the classroom. We need to use our voice as a tool to engage our students. And instead of like, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ¿eh? ¿Sí? Chicos, buenos días, clase. Buenos días. ¿Cómo está? Lower the tone of voice. That's telling them, I need to be quiet so I can hear what he's trying to say. But these things won't happen if you don't have the connection with your students. And that's why the first 2-3 weeks we need to work really hard on making connections with them. And if you need to use the first language to make those connections, okay. See? How many times, you speak a second language, that's why you're here. How many times do you go back to your first language in order to understand something, and you have been speaking this language for years? See? And we want them to just 90% target language. Oh, ¿sí? Muy bien. Entonces, fotografías, pictures, visual materials, a lot of visuals, ¿sí? Simplify the message. Simplify the message. And we have ways to do that, see? Through, again, gestures or even using words that you know that they know. Because if you're teaching the Spanish 3 class or the French 3 class, you kind of have an idea what they have studied in other classes. Use those words. No, but we need to teach them new words. No, we need to make it meaningful, communicative first, and then, yes, bring the other thing, the other part, okay? But if you immediately just bring the new words and the new concepts, half of the class is going to be frustrated. So, simplify the message. Make it small, chunks, manageable for the students. Okay. Those are some tips, and I just want to move on because we're almost done here. Something that I like about CI, teaching with CI, is the democracy aspect. Because number one, you use your own context to learn the language. So you don't have to go to El Acueducto de Sevilla in order to learn the language. You don't have to go to the Tour Eiffel, La Torre Eiffel, in order to learn French. You can work with your own context. What is going on at school? What is going on with your life? So it's democratic. No textbook required, see? Because in reality, when you want an excuse to use the language, your lesson planning is simple, but the delivery is a little more complicated. It's the opposite. When we're used to teach the traditional way, the lesson planning is a headache, but the class is so easy because they're filling out papers and whatever. No high tech required, see, because you're there in front of the students. But there are some tools that are really good, like Textivate, Edpuzzle. Those are things that I really like to use because it helps them organize the language in their brain. Empathy. So the CI classes builds empathy in the sense that those kids who feel so smart in the math class and look at the other ones like this, all of a sudden they're just part of the same group in the class. And we know that they're smarter. And we know that probably Ben is going to go to Harvard, where the other student is going to go to a state university because it's different, see? But creating that empathy in the classroom to understand the other, to put yourself in the shoes of the other person, it's key. and it's a community builder. Muy bien. So I'm gonna give you